welcome to Conversations with Natalie. Conversations are so important, and through conversations with others, we can gather nuggets, gold nuggets, nuggets of wisdom, nuggets of knowledge. And when you have conversations with others, you start to learn a little bit about them. They share their stories, they share their knowledge, and they share their experience. And this is what Conversations with Natalie is all about. It's about having a conversation with fellow business owners to share their wisdom, their knowledge, and their nuggets. So today I would like to welcome Stuart on Conversations with Natalie, and I'm really excited to have him here. I met him not that long ago. We met at networking, and the thing that got me intrigued was the brain sitting right behind him with a pair with socks. I mean, who has socks and a brain next to each other? So this is going to be an interesting conversation, and we're going to talk a few things not planned, but one of the topics that will be coming up is introverts. So thank you, Stuart, for coming on here to share your nuggets, to share any wisdom that you might have, or impart some knowledge, or just have fun.
Great to be here, and yeah, we had a brief chat fairly recently, and the introvert connection's good because do you know what I find that when it's not a hidden secret as such, but it's when you know somebody's like you are in terms of how they access the world, it just makes things so much easier because you don't have to fight against it or pretend, and certainly when I go to big networking meetings, like I went to one this morning with loads and loads of people there, it's just, oh my goodness, the number of people there. It's just like a wall of people, and it's just great to just go, do you know what, introverts, go in that corner please, and then you can all just have the quiet conversations, which I find it's just good to get it out there.
We need that sign, don't we? That just like introverts, 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 and they just point us into a direction, and then you can just have this lovely big neon sign with loud music just going that way, and all the extroverts will just know to go into that corner. And
yeah, perhaps that's what we do. We turn it the other way around and say extroverts over there, and where the loud music is and dancing and things, and everybody else that's left is normal.
And then again, what is normal? But that's a whole different conversation, isn't it?
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about how you've landed up where you are now, and what is the meaning of the brain that's on my right, so I guess your left, and the socks that are on my left, your right. So tell us a little bit about Stuart, the brain, and socks.
Okay, it's very briefly to cut a very long story short. Obviously, in terms of years, I joined the part-time army whilst I was working as a salesperson. The worst person to be a salesperson, by the way. So I joined the part-time army. Then from there, I realised that I enjoyed that environment. So I joined the Royal Air Force as an officer. Discovered that I had a particular skill at taking orders from people, distilling that, working out the plan, giving it to people, make sure they did it, and was really really grateful to receive an annual award for leadership at RAF College Cranwell, way back, probably before you were born, Natalie. That's such a long time ago. So
Bless you, thank you.
I then won an annual prize presented by the Queen, which was just an awesome occasion. So did a few years in the RAF, did 22 years of RAF service. I discovered that the ideal criteria for an officer in the Royal Air Force was first E for extrovert, and I just couldn't find out why my brain wasn't why in group environments, in a mess bar or in a group huddle or whatever, I was kind of struggling to make sense of the whole thing, and not really interacting like other people, just off the top of their heads just going blah, 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 and finding it frustrating, like an introvert would do, that I wanted to join in the conversation but couldn't find the right moment to jump in. Then by the time I got in, about 2 minutes later, they'd moved on to 3 different topics, and it made no sense to me whatsoever. So when I left the Air Force, having had no training whatsoever in how to spot my personality trait, apart from doing psychometric profiling tests, which basically said, you're this, and I always cheated. I always thought, what would you like me to be like? And then I can pretend I'm that sort of thing. So when I left the Air Force 10 years ago, took my mask off, did a lot of introverted thinking about things, looked at different books, and I thought, there's this one book we talked about fairly recently called Introvert Power, which when I read it, I just thought, oh my God, that's me. That's absolutely me. And look at the characteristics and my powers and strengths and things like this. So to cut a very long story short, as I said, left the Air Force after 22 years of frankly surviving in that environment, set off to do my own business. And I then spent a few years, 10 years, studying psychology, got a psychology degree, working with the brain. Then discovered some products a couple of years ago which actually helps the brain in a most amazing way, without having to do anything. All you do is you put these socks on, or these insoles, or some stupid sleeve thing, and it all impacts on the human brain. So specifically, the brain stem, that's the part that goes from the spine into the brain itself, into the limbic system. It calms that down, and that massively intrigued me to coin a phrase, to look internally at what we've got going on inside our brains, and that just fascinated me. And we started to look into brain mapping, as in looking at how the brain communicates to external areas and how that information flow goes across, and absolutely fascinating. And as a result of customers buying the products off me, I've seen some amazing transformations and some lives changed for way the better in the last 2 years that I've been telling people about this.
So, I mean, I love the brain. The brain fascinates me. I'm fascinated by neuroscience. I've even done a course on neuroscience, and I'm part of a group. I call it the Brain Lab. It's my once a month. It's a sort of a membership group, but that for me is me time, sitting talking about the brain. I mean, that's such a typical introvert thing, isn't it? You sit quietly listening and learning and thinking and everything else. So yeah, I can really understand why you've been fascinated by how the brain works. And you mentioned that you're an introvert. You mentioned having been in the Air Force, that is quite an extroverted place, but you've honed a few skills and had realizations. But one thing that I'd love to learn from you, because in a previous life, I've done a multi-level business, and it's a great business model. It's a fantastic way to get trainings, to start a business, to have a side hustle or whatever it is. How do you find creating a business as an introvert? How are you finding this business model and bringing your introversion into it and doing it in a way that suits you or makes you comfortable? What have you sort of learned or picked up or experimenting with or whatever?
Yeah, it's quite a daunting thing actually, because when I first started off doing telling people that I've got things that might help their brain, I used to get a lot of people just saying to me, whatever, it sounds too good to be true, and I wasn't really confident in myself, which is the fundamental thing. Or indeed at that stage, at the very start of my journey with these set of products, I wasn't that comfortable with the products because I didn't know enough. But over time, I've learnt about some amazing stories. So what I now start to do is, instead of thinking about speaking to the person that I'm speaking directly to, I talk about somebody else. So I talk about somebody's amazing story. So I talk about their frustration, their skepticism about how these things might work, and then talk about the results they got. And that seems to attract enough attention to then have a proper conversation about it. I'll always have, in a physical networking environment, I'll always have some sort of prop, which I always call a conversation starter. So when people say to me, what is that? You've got a strange looking drink or a golf club or a sword or whatever it happens to be. What is that thing you've got there? I call it a conversation starter. Oh really? Why is that? Because you've just come up and spoken to me, which is a great way for an introvert of not having to break into a crowd of people. So when you go to normal networking groups, you get like 4 people standing around in a small circle. You get 1 or 2 standing over there and whatever else, and you then got to quickly for me, for an introvert, you've got to analyse the room, find out where there's somebody that's open enough to talk to, and then you've got to kind of sidle across there and stand there stupidly at the side with your cup of coffee, just going, do you mind if I join in? So when you've got a prop or something that's quite interesting to look at, I find that people will now come to me and say, that looks interesting. What is that? Which is a
really
nice
good
way
tip.
of starting the conversation off. And the other aspect is that I choose my networking environments very carefully. So there are some which are available with what they call open networking. So it's on a Zoom call with like 24 little camera pieces on the online, or in reality it's just loads of people that know each other seemingly. Absolute nightmare. I really hate them with a passion, and sometimes I've arrived at one place to find that big massive bodies, and I've just looked in and just driven back home again straight away, because it's just, sometimes it can seem like it's an impenetrable mass of people and bodies and blah 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 blah, extroversion. It doesn't mean to say I can't cope in that environment. It just means that it's more difficult to break into in the first place, and it's then about trying to create these small little groups, whether it's online or in person, trying to create small little groups where I'm not standing there trying to preach to everybody.
So you find really is picking the right networks for you. It's knowing which ones are not this massive of almost like a wall of noise that you just feel you're walking into. It might not be that noisy, but that's what it feels like. So you do a mixture of online and face-to-face networking.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
have you found your sort of your the right meetings, or are you still looking, you still trying to find the right ones?
I think I found well, certainly the ones I've been to in the last this portion of the year, this first quarter of 2022, seems to work quite well for me. But I'm always finding out new ones. This morning, somebody was telling me about like a foster parent company, foster parent charity, for example, and she said, "What about children that have come, as she called it, damaged to the foster parents, and the foster parents then spending time just sitting there watching the child and this sort of thing?" And she said there's a whole set of meetings that goes on with these people, and they could find out about your products and these sort of things. And I thought, well, actually, I'm nowhere near done in terms of finding out the groups of people that would be interested for my business, the particular business I'm doing. So I'm always looking. The ones that I've found so far have been working really well. Certainly the one of the ones which is online, which I don't think we've talked about, a thing called Business Buzz. They were online with Remo, and they had a maximum table size or video camera size of 6 people, which was eminently approachable. So in terms of the number of people, but even then you still find that on a table of 6 you can still get 2 or 3 people that just dominate, and the 2 or 3 of us left are just going,
Oh, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one who has those experiences.
no, it's just, I don't know whether it's a lack of emotional intelligence, or whether they just don't care if somebody else gets a word in. But every time I go to a table, and if I'm there and some people are, I just say to them, be a great opportunity now for you to go and have a chat on a table for 2, which is over there, and we can just carry on. Or I say, hey,
is
Natalie,
this your Air Force officer training coming out?
Yeah, probably more than that. It's also a bit of me understanding what it's like to be left on the sidelines, being ignored in some cases and overlooked. So I want to stop anybody else having that same experience. So I always try to bring other people into the conversation. So if you haven't spoken for a while, I'd say, Natalie, what do you think about that?
And chances are, if it's me, I'm most probably sitting there doing something totally different because I'm not part of it. But
because you get bored.
I don't always like to just leave the meeting or something. So you just sit and almost have it as background noise, waiting till you go to the next table. So, but one thing I've noticed, and I'd love to get your idea, or if you've experienced this or anything, but I find sometimes with networking, especially if I have had a fairly busy day or just for whatever reason, there are times where I just don't feel like talking. And there's times I'm just quite happy to just sit and listen, but I don't necessarily want to be talking or want to be sharing anything. There's this me being antisocial, because I always thought I was antisocial and rude because that's how I was brought up. Stop being so antisocial, stop being so rude. I've taught you better manners than this. This is how I was brought up, and this is what, I just thought I was rude and, like I said, antisocial, not realizing actually I'm introverted and we like to just have our quiet moments. So I sometimes sit there and I'm thinking, I really don't feel like talking. I don't feel like being part of this. Maybe I shouldn't have joined the meeting to start with, but you made a commitment, so you turn up. And then I just think, am I okay being antisocial and just keeping quiet? Or, it's like, take that deep breath and just dig in for that last little bit of energy, and then, almost put on an energetic hat and think, okay, let me do this. I can do this. How do you feel if you ever come across situations like that? What do you do?
So you've raised quite a few things in that one little segment there, about first of all, belief that it's being antisocial. The way that I term that, it's about being very thoughtful and very consciously aware of what other people are saying. So when they've finished doing their blah 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 blah, I'll often come about with, and what Jeanette said there was very appropriate because of X, Y, and Z, and Jim talked about da 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 da. So I kind of tie the whole thing together and then just let them know that I've been intently listening to what they've been saying. And I sometimes use their language patterns as well to let them know that I get them. So they're talking about the big vision or anything else like this, and I'm just listening intently to what they're saying and how they're behaving and whatever else. So that's the first thing about what you just came up with there about being antisocial. I don't view it as being that. I view it as being intently aware of what they're saying.
I like that. I'm gonna take them from now on. Is when I'm thinking about, how my mother always told me I was being antisocial. I'll just think, no, actually, I was being purposefully intentful.
Perfect, isn't it? And and again, I've heard that. I actually had I think my first my annual report in the Royal Air Force after I graduated from training. My first report, I think, was contained the words, Holcroft is an aloof character. And doesn't socialise particularly well. And he gave me an example of how in a massive group conversation in a taverna in Cyprus, he said, and people were talking about things, and then somebody said, how's your car getting on? And I said, oh, I changed it over 3 months ago. And he said, that proves you're antisocial. What? So I've had it for a long time now where people have said, but for me it's about just that intense concentration that extroverts don't have. They don't have the skill of listening to everything like that, and they often miss things. So I often, I drop something in conversation with an extrovert to say, do you remember a few months ago you said blah blah blah? And they go, no, it wasn't me. Well, funnily enough, I've got a note here that on my piece of paper in that last meeting we had, you said that. Oh, did I? And and then they suddenly start to listen, and it's that's quite a skill I think that introverts possess. That is something that extroverts just because a general trait of an extrovert is to be in the moment and reactive to the situation without processing too deeply and therefore putting it into the random access memory. And so that's one of the key things that we have. The other thing you talked about there was when you don't feel like contributing. It depends on the message you've got for people. So if, for example, as a confidence coach, you're talking about training introverts to be confident, it's probably not an appropriate thing to talk about that with a group of extroverts. So therefore, to keep your powder dry in that respect, in that situation, is quite an allowable thing. And sometimes, yes, you're absolutely right. You can be there for a conversation that's taken part away from you, but actually there is no actual requirement to join in. I do sometimes just switch my microphone off sometimes, and then switch the camera off. And then they'll go, Stuart, you still there? Oh yes, hang on. Just unmute myself. Or in a live thing, I'll just sort of move just subtly in front of them or whatever. But yeah, I do find that a lot of people in networking environments don't necessarily have the emotional connection to people to say, it's time for you to talk. And I had one this morning at about 11 o'clock, and there was this one person that came into the group and just went blah 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 blah, blah and me and I and I and I. And I thought, yeah, okay. And then after about a good 10 minutes, somebody then said, oh, you want to speak to Stuart about what he does? And I said, what is it you do? I said, I've got these amazing things that help people's brains to calm down. She went, I need that.
So you actually are with your products and what you do, you actually suit it to be in a room full of extroverts, because you can help their brains to just slow down a minute. But as a little introvert in you thinking, oh my word, I don't want to be in this room with all this going on.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. You mentioned that introverts are sort of listening and processing information, and sometimes just sitting back and being present but not contributing can help us to process what people are saying. But not only that, in some ways it's also about giving value to that person who's just going me blah 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 blah, and they're just carrying on. But by listening and just doing that can sometimes help them to calm down. Because one thing I've noticed is, especially in networking environments, I mean, not many people, there are a few, but not many people really love networking. It's intense, because you've got that short moment to pretty much sell yourself or sell what it is you're doing, or let people know what it is you're doing. And a lot of people don't necessarily have the skill of short speeches, or they just get so nervous that they don't know how to stop. It's almost like they just don't know how to their mouth, and they just keep going. And extroverts struggle with that as well. They can be insecure, they can have low self-esteem, they can lack confidence, but they have a better way of hiding that than an introvert does. And I've noticed sometimes when people are just like blah, and are just coming at a hell of a speed, what I start to do is I start to look at them as a person, and almost step back, and I think, okay, I'm going to put my confidence coach hat on. Let me see, is this somebody just so arrogant that they're just going to blah, and it's all about me? Or is it somebody who's actually so nervous that doesn't know how to stop? And I have fun with that, because if it's somebody who's arrogant, I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever, and I just leave them do it, doing what they got to do. But if it's somebody who's nervous or appearing insecure, or I'm thinking that they might just lack some confidence, is then finding a way to almost put that brick in front of them so that they come to a halt, and you can almost see it's like, oh, thank God thank God I can keep quiet now. And that I found quite interesting. Is I think as an introvert, it's almost I'm able to see behind the words, or behind the that's coming out, and stop
Absolutely.
them, or help them to stop themselves.
Yeah, and again, there are going to be some people out there that call themselves an ambivert, but I still don't ascribe to that concept. I think you're either introvert or extrovert to varying degrees, and there's no such thing as an ambivert. You're either adapting as an introvert or adapting as an extrovert to bring those skills forward. I believe anyway. But
you're going to have a lot of ambiverts going, hey, no.
Yeah, but who's come up with that? It's just a PhD that's come up with a philosophy and said, here's a new concept, and give me my PhD. But essentially, you either internalise things and make sense of it in time in your own head, or you seek other people to brainstorm off them, and you collaborate in that way. And that for me is what the definition is of an introvert and extrovert. It's the way you think about things. For me, anyway, that's my understanding. And yeah, I don't believe that an extrovert can be a coach.
Interesting.
a coach who's extroverted will do more talking than listening, and therefore they're going to give you more things which sometimes won't connect with people, whereas an introverted coach can then say, what I'm hearing is blah blah blah, and you're using their language patterns and their vocalization, and you can then say, okay, so where would you like to go with this? Listen, listen, listen. Introvert, internalize, make sense of the whole thing. And my having met quite a few business coaches in the recent past few years online, lots of them talk and talk and talk, and you think, right, so if I was a business coach, first of all, I'd be doing lots of listening. So I would say to people in a networking environment, I don't want to give you a 60 seconds or whatever. I want to just listen to what you've got on. So tell me what it is that affects you about your business or where you'd like to go. Who'd like to start me off? And again, when you talk about your blurt that people have got to give, I gave one this morning, and I stood there with the golf club, again my prop for the day, and wearing golf attire, and saying, I'd love to speak. I'm looking for golf coaches because I've got this technology that in 7 seconds is going to change your brain. It's over there, but it's only for intelligent people. And shut up. Because that's sometimes all you need to say just to create that conversation or to get somebody sufficiently intrigued to go and speak to you about it. And am I ever happy giving those? No. But I make it happen. I control my breathing, get into the right state of mind and just blurt it out.
Well, there's sometimes this misconception idea that introverts can't do public speaking, introverts can't be sociable, introverts can't be confident, introverts can't, and that's actually not true. And as you said, it's only the way that we use our brains or the way that we think and the way that we process our energy. That's the difference. Introverts can be as ambitious or as an extrovert. Extroverts can have no confidence. Extroverts can be bad at public speaking. So you can shift it, but it's almost, and this is something that I've noticed. So this is sort of my opinion that I've come up with. So correct me if you think I'm way off track here. But I sometimes think that introversion and extroversion has become popular now. And people are labeling themselves, and even the ambivert in the middle. And it's like, well, I'm introverted, so I can't do that. Well, why not? Well, because I'm introverted. Okay, so first of all, do you understand what being introverted means? And second of all, why can't you do that? There are some amazing public speakers who class themselves as introverts. And they hold rooms with thousands of people. They hold that energy. They are confident. Why shouldn't they be? And this is something that there's almost this misconception that if you're an extrovert, you can be a good business owner, but if you're an introvert, you can't. And this is something that I'm finding quite interesting. It's always interesting how people jump onto labels, give it to themselves, and then that's what they do with their life. And I'm thinking, but as an introvert, you can do anything with your life. You just find a way to do it, a way that's comfortable to doing it.
Yeah,
does that make sense to a fellow introvert?
Absolutely. So a lot of people like to wear a badge on them, don't they? They go, I'm a you can't read that now, but it's just shy introvert. And then they'll everything they do will be living up to that badge because that's what they've developed as their new persona. And again, I often say to people, if we're in this conversation, which we're doing now, do you know what? The way you come across has nothing to do whatsoever with the way you process information, because when I was on a call last night where I was talking about all the technology to as many people as possible being recorded live. And there's no room for error. It's just you're just in a stream of consciousness and you're delivering all that thing. Before that, I was in the RAF and delivering all sorts of conference speeches and leading parades and all sorts of things. It's got nothing to do with the way you process information. It's just the way you choose to behave or the way you choose to come across. So again, I could be the most shy, retiring type in a group environment, or I could be centre stage. That would be horrible for me, but if that's what I need to do at that time, then that's what I do, in order to make that particular impression. My one scariest moment actually in the Air Force was when I was the boss of a training organisation in a drinking environment, and I wasn't all that familiar with my speech, and I stood up, got heckled straight away as the boss, and then I just had to just get through that and just sit down and just go, do you know what, I'm not going to do that ever again, because that was such a horrible experience to do, that I'm going to prepare even more than normal and make sure I know exactly what I'm talking about. You're absolutely, I agree entirely that people have this concept that you're introverted or whatever. I've heard the comment so many times. I say to people, I'm an introvert, and they go, you're what? You're no way. I said, yes, I am. They say, well, you seem like the most confident person possible. I said, well, that's because I wear a persona. So when I go into a networking meeting or a business meeting, my persona is different. That's how I'm projecting as a genuine, caring, interactive person, and I'm really listening to what you're saying, but I'm also interacting as well. So yes, I put me in a pub where I don't know anybody, I'll be in the corner.
We like to sit and observe.
Yeah.
So a question I have for you is, how did things change for you once you started to learn a little bit more about who you were? So learning about that you're an introvert, and how you can, the changes that you needed to make, or the lessons that you learned from that. How did that have an impact on you as Stuart, or as a business owner?
That's a great question, because I haven't really thought about that before, which is like every great question, isn't it? How did it impact on me? I think it just made sense of things, because for years and years I've done all these psychometric profiling things which gave me a certain thing, but then nobody ever said, and you will find it difficult to do whatever, or you need to speak to these kind of people, or this is the best environment for you. They never did that thing. They just said, we've paid you for your profiling, there you go, there's your profile. So you put it onto a piece of paper, have it in front of you, disc profile or Belbit, Myers-Briggs or whatever, all on there, and then did nothing with it. And it was only when I left the Air Force and did a lot of NLP training, hypnosis work, and things like this, that I suddenly realised that actually I'd been living a bit of a lie in the Air Force. So it was really empowering to know that when I was in a group environment or standing my own in the bar, there was a reason for it, and based upon my childhood. I'm not going to get particularly Freudian here, or delve into my background, but didn't have the most empowering of childhoods, and that's probably led to me thinking that I'm not worth it, or my opinions don't matter, blah blah blah. All of which I've learned to get rid of over time. But a lot of people have the belief that they're not worth it in some ways, and that's where somebody like you comes into great play, where you talk about confidence coaching. It's about loving yourself, loving what you're doing, and loving what you're giving to other people as well. So people like what you're doing. That's really, I'm really eloquent today. So people that do what you do is a great thing, because I just think that the more confident we can make everybody in Britain, in Europe, in the world, then the better environment's going to be. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, and I'll take that. I'll take all of that. It is interesting how just you starting to realize sort of who you are, and learning yourself how to adapt to that, or how to utilize it is almost powerful, and it's a way to help yourself. So the follow-on question to that would be, now that you know that you're an introvert, and now that you are understanding it, but now you've got your business that you've adapted, you've created this new business, you working on it, how has that helped you to take the introversion and to grow from there and to build a business from there?
Again, another good question. I haven't properly embraced some of the things that perhaps I should be doing. So I think one of the things that I haven't really looked into in any great way is use of social media. I'm quite happy in front of a camera. I'm quite happy delivering a mentally or physically prepared script to camera and letting people know about what I do and this sort of thing. But I'm not one of these people that would happily post on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever on a regular basis. Look what I'm doing. Look at my breakfast. Look who I just met, and this sort of thing that a lot of people do. But again, that's a sign of insecurity in some ways, like you said beforehand, and it's about drilling down into the personality themselves and the person and finding out who they really are. And a lot of people that post things on social media are really insecure, and they do that as a kind of an emotional crutch. So I think that knowing who I am, how I get my energy, I still have some growth required to really get myself out there and to get more business going and to help more people. But actually, I've been doing pretty well in the last 2 years already. So it's I actively avoid the big open networking things where you've got, as I said before, about 60 people on the screen and people are shouting over each other, and man, I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to leave. Goodbye. Go back to bed at 7 o'clock in the morning.
But it's about finding the right networks. Then it's knowing
right
how you are in these different environments, and then it's finding the right environments for you instead of just pushing through and just persevering to the point that you are so exhausted and getting nowhere. You just use up all this energy essentially for nothing because you're not in the right environment.
Yeah. I think one of the best things that somebody said to me recently about introversion extroversion is that an introvert uses all the energy when they're in a meeting with other people, and then they have to take time away to recharge, whereas an extrovert gains their energy from a meeting and therefore they don't have to recharge. But again, when they're away from that environment, they just start to go, I need some I need somebody.
They need that noise. They need those 60 people shouting over each other, and that they thrive in that.
Yeah, and one of the is a funny thing, is a sad thing, I don't know. But during the first lockdown, we my wife and I ran a village quiz night, and we also provided cocktails. She happens to work in a brewery, and we got loads of alcohol thrown at us and this sort of thing. So we did this thing online. And at the time, I had a normal Zoom room without breakout rooms, this sort of thing. So we had this Zoom quiz. So we had about 12 families on this, and there was one person in particular that was your absolutely typical extrovert. So she had to dominate all the conversations, and she was also on her own, and she had a bottle of wine before the meeting. Then she'd have another bottle of wine during the meeting, so she'd get louder and louder and louder. And in the end, people started to leave because they just couldn't get a word in the thing after the quiz. So during the quiz, obviously, it was Quizmaster reads a question, everybody shuts up, blah, blah, blah. And then the bit afterwards and beforehand where she was dominating the whole thing, I then discovered people started to leave. So then I had to upgrade my Zoom system to get breakout rooms and subtly put her into a room with one other person only. And then they could get a word in because it was just one-to-one. And then, really, really sad. But you've sometimes got to do that. And how else would you approach that to say, I'm going to call her Jane, it's not her real name. Jane, you need to realise that other people are leaving this group because you're not allowing them time in. But I know you're lonely at the same time, and you're getting your energy from people. And
I think that is one thing, Zoom versus face-to-face, especially in a networking all the time. It is, but you can walk away and find somebody else who's sitting there quietly, whereas on Zoom you're stuck in this and you cannot then go and chat to somebody else, whereas if you're in a face-to-face environment, whether it's a quiz or networking, you can almost subtly ease away from that little circle and find somebody who's on their own or just step away
Well,
and
just,
observe.
excuse me, the phone's ringing. I just need to take this phone call.
That is a way, yes. And sometimes I do think that introverts face to face in a face to face environment might do slightly better, purely because they can then find that other person who's on the outskirts and talk to them, or have their prop and wait for somebody else to see their prop and come and talk to them. Whereas in a Zoom environment, you can't do that. It's that one person who's having that conversation dominates everybody, or everybody is there. Whereas in face-to-face environments, you can have these segments, which I guess would be breakout rooms, but then you have to have somebody who's observing this and creating the breakout rooms and putting people into them. So it's really interesting how over the last 2 years, how introverts and extroverts are finding this new way of almost being and communicating and building businesses. It's quite interesting. I'm finding it really interesting to see the different dynamics and what works and what doesn't work. And yeah, it's watch the space and see what happens. We might even get this is, networking for extroverts, networking for introverts, and introverts will be so quiet. They'll just sit there with our books. And
But you know what? I actually came up with the concept of doing that a couple of years ago, and I thought, you know what? I wonder if this is going to fly. And like most people, internally analyse it so much that just get tied up in the weeds. And I think, yeah, somebody else might do that. That'd be great. But I wonder how many other introverts are thinking about that thing as well. About, what would it be like with a group of introverts? And again, introverts aren't necessarily quiet. It's just that they process information differently. So if you had an environment where it was an introvert at a table with other introverts, you'd all get a chance to speak. Nobody would dominate unless you'd ask them a question about how is it you start off with somebody with confidence, and what you start off with next, and give us some information. But actually, they would all look after each other, I believe, anyway.
mm. It is interesting, and I'm gonna fight for the extroverts here. I really am. Sometimes I think that extroverts help introverts to almost step up as well, especially if you've got a sympathetic extrovert and who does notice. So I've come across extroverts who run networkings who really do look for the people who are sort of on the outskirts, and brings them in and brings them into the conversation and introduces them. And I think that's more an instinct thing as opposed to, they might be introvert. I think it's more, okay, they look a bit lost, let me introduce them to somebody else. And they seem to know to introduce you to the right person. And I think extroverts are really good at that. They're good at bringing people together, because that's what they do. They like to bring people together and have you together. And I think extroverts can run really good network meetings.
That's the key thing you've just said there. If they are running the meeting, and the meeting is there for networking, and therefore it's their business to do that, then they're much more likely to connect people together. But equally, as an introvert, I can quite happily do that function as well. So I help out with some networking groups, and I quite often look at people standing on their own and just say, "Hey, come and join this person. Who is it you're looking to speak to? Here's this person here. Let's make the conversation happen."
But you've learned the art of socializing, or you've more confident in that type of environment, whereas especially a new business owner who just doesn't have that confidence to do that, to bring them in. And even though I'm fairly, I'm confident in social environments, I've done a lot of networking, I've done public speaking, I don't like bringing people together. Okay. That's not a skill that I enjoy. So that's something I'm the one who is standing in the corner observing, and then will see where I will step in or not. But when I see, and I'm quite happy to go and talk to somebody else who looks like they're on their own or lost or something, but bringing a lot of people in together is something that is not a skill that I'm particularly good at or enjoy. And this might be the introversion that comes in. It's the going back to the being antisocial bit, but it is interesting how the differences can create almost harmony in some ways. And, talking about the introvert and extrovert networking, I think we need those extroverts just to stop it from being a totally silent room with all of us reading a book or something.
Or an introvert that knows how to run a networking meeting. It's just
Yeah,
yeah.
that'd be good.
I mean, yeah. I'm not even going to stand up for extroverts because they're the enemy. I am joking.
No, we need the good old introverts. We do need them, because imagine not having any, how we would just slowly withdraw into ourselves, and we need them to just keep us, out there. But
just walking down the street, look, another introvert's just imploded.
Oh, this has been a lot of fun, and it is nice to talk with fellow introverts. But before we leave off, do you have any last minute thoughts or ideas or wisdom to share? Yes, even those nuggets you don't want to share. Come on, I'm sure you got a nugget you can share, or just something that you would like to share with the audience.
Yeah, so what I would say is, if you're an introverted business owner and you go to a networking environment where you're on your own, you don't know anybody whatsoever, just look for somebody on their own and just try and find out some hidden detail about them or their life. So try to make it your mission to find out something that nobody else in that room knows about, just by asking them the questions, and by focusing on them rather than yourself and your natural reluctance to go and speak to people. Focus on them instead, and just think, what could I get out of that person that's going to be really cool to share with other people in this environment today. And again, I sometimes do that, or I find out what they do or what they want to connect with, and just make that introduction much easier. And it's just a conversation starter, right? It's just to get you to take that first step, to go towards somebody else, and then just to have that conversation. But once you've started moving, don't stop, keep going, and make that first question.
And at the end of the day, networking is about building your business. And as an introvert, network, if you're there to build your business. And
exactly,
you do need to network and reach out to people. So that's a good tip. That's a good tip. So I just want to say thank you very much for being here and, sharing your experiences as being an introvert, and tips and things that you can do with networking. It's always, networking is such a big part of growing a business, and as introverts it sometimes can be a real struggle, but it doesn't have to be. It's about finding the right ways, or the little tricks that we can do to help us to do it. But I really appreciate the time you shared with us today, and thank you so much. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, good laugh. And equally, a last message for any introverts watching this, and you've got natural reluctance rather to go and speak to new people. Give Natalie a call, and she'll talk to you about introversion and building up your confidence to help you make that step. Because after all, you're in your business to make money, right? If you don't speak to people about your business, you aren't going to make as much money as you could do. So by having that little bit of confidence, or that little bit of clarity, or just some of the techniques, then that's going to help your business tremendously, and helping other people, right? Because you're in business to help other people. So Natalie, thanks for the call. Really enjoyed it, and it's nice to have a chance to speak.
And this is what introverts do. We just
Absolutely
get down and dirty in our conversations.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much,
Right.
and I'll be talking to you soon.
All right, take care.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you got some nuggets, some knowledge, and some wisdom from it. Please do like and share this video, and also subscribe to the channel.